So welcome, dear listeners of Progressiva. We have the comfortable situation of hearing again a familiar voice, which was a newcomer last time, and now she's already here for the second time. Sign of appreciation. So Berit Ebert from the Bard College, she introduced herself in the last podcast. So by now we are confident with her, and we would skip a little the introduction and go rightly to the core. You remember that Berit studied or is working also in the field of Poland and rule of law and women's rights. So this is the topic of the podcast, as Poland is in the last month at the center of our attention, because there was, I would say, an unhoped news coming from the last election, where the opposition to the peace government, the government that took over 2015, and was sanctioned also by Timmermans at the time, and then also by the following commissioners for not respecting basically properly the rule of law. One example is the enforced retirement of many judges. So the independence of the judicial system was diminished, but many others, and Berit will tell us about it. So that a campaign was, in my perception, my humble perception, and again, here we have an expert, so she can correct me, there was already the fear that it was too late for have really fair campaign where a majority shift could be achieved. But this was the case. A really stable majority for the opposition has been achieved, and there is a change. So first of all, let's focus on the past, and then we go toward the future. I have already said there were problems with the European Commission respect to rule of law. Let's dig a little deeper into that.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the second invitation. I enjoyed the first time very much, and I'm sure that we will go through this very joyfully here today too. So you asked me about like the conflict with the European Commission, and of course, at the core was the independence of judges, the rule of law, but also the equality between men and women. And I would also center a little bit my answer around how the two are connected, because in the end, a lot of the cases that the European Court of Justice dealt with both problems here. You already mentioned that a law dated back to 2017 lowered the mandatory retirement age of ordinary court justices and public prosecutors, as well as the age for early retirement for Supreme Court judges, from 70 to 60 for women and to 65 for men. This is a clear breach of the European Union's principle of equal pay, and the principle of equal pay has been part of the treaties since 1957 with the establishment of the European Community. So it's really, we're looking at the core value here of the European Union. And in addition to that, the Polish Minister of Justice was granted the discretion to prolong the period of office for justice on ordinary courts. So they were forced to retire early. They could apply for a prolongation, but the chances that this would actually be approved by the Minister of Justice, who of course was also coming from the peace, was very low. The result of that was that the body of the judiciary would be reduced by its amount of female and regime critical members, of course also male regime critical members. I would like to share some numbers here. As a result of that reform, 27 of 72 judges were forced to leave the Supreme Court before their 6-year term in office officially ended. This was sort of the judicial side of that, but this judicial move was accompanied with several misogynist and homophobic policies. We've seen the attempt to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention. We have seen the reform of the abortion law, that basically mandated that fetuses that were not to survive after birth must still be carried to term. Possibilities to form same-sex partnerships were limited. The presentation of non-heterosexual relationships in material that was accessible to children and to schools was also forbidden, and teachers also massively supported that. In 2021, the European Parliament noted that about 100 regions in Poland have declared themselves to be LGBT-free zones, and these regions spoke out and imposed resolutions against what they called LGBT ideology. So what you see here is there was a quantitative reduction in the judiciary of critical voices, a public defamation of anything that would be in support of diversity, and hence then limiting their credibility and, in the long run, also, of course, their democratic participation and impact, because they were forced out. With regard to the rule of law, and the independence of the judiciary, the government forced through a change that concerned mostly the composition of two Polish legal entities. One is called the National Council of the Judiciary, and the other the Disciplinary Chamber. And both were made dependent on the executive. The Disciplinary Chamber was empowered to end judges' terms in office simply because of professional misconduct, and professional misconduct in that case could be a judgment that was not in line with what the government had in mind. And the Disciplinary Chamber also consisted entirely of newly appointed judges chosen by the other body, the National Council of the Judiciary. The main task of this body is to recommend candidates to the president for the appointment of judges. And since 2015, this body was successively filled with judges who were close to the Peace Party, and it was, which was, as we know, the dominant force in the Sejm. This was not the end of all of that. Since 2019, legal remedies against candidate decisions by the National Council were completely abolished, and pending complaints were simply declared as resolved. So there was nothing of judicial independence to be secured anymore. And this is, of course, what the European Commission then, in a way, try to change with various different attempts. One was the initiation of several infringement procedures, which have proven to be extremely powerful in that regard. Several times the Commission referred Poland to the European Court of Justice for the violation of the rule of law, the loss of the independence of the judiciary, and the violation of equal pay. And equal pay and independence of the judiciary was, of course, here connected, because a lot of female judges were forced out. And I think it's well known that there was one famous judgment that then finally led the Commission to impose a daily fine of 1 million euros on Poland. Of course, Poland didn't simply wire those 1 million by bank transfer, but it was deducted from the payments that Poland was supposed to receive from the European Union. The Commission also evoked the rule of law mechanism under Article 7, which was established under the Barroso Commission to further secure the rule of law within member states. And it would start with a dialogue procedure where the Commission would start to be in conversation with Poland and give them advice as to how to rectify the rule of law breaches. Nothing has happened. So the Article 7 procedure began, and the first step enabled the Council of the European Union to determine, and I quote, whether there was a clear and serious breach of the values referred to in Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union. A second 5 hearings then happened, actually, until May 2022, with the Council, where Poland was of course arguing for their cause. And then, as a second step, there is the possibility for the European Council, we're talking here about the heads of states and government, to determine a serious, and here it's important, a persistent breach by member states of the Article 2 values. As a consequence of that second step, sanctions would be possible. And that has never happened. So this was kind of lost in space here. However, despite no sanctions have resulted out of the Article 7 procedure, I think what is important is that the action of the European Commission was not only discussed in Poland, it was discussed union-wide. We were aware of the topic, which of course also had an impact on Poland's reputation within the other European state, but also any groups belonging to the opposition in Poland had the security that the European Union institutions, or at least the Commission and the European Court of Justice, shared their cause. And I consider this highly, highly important, because we have seen that a lot of judges on all levels challenged the judicial reforms by initiating requests for preliminary rulings with the European Court of Justice, challenging the current reforms. And this is a preliminary ruling. I always say, it doesn't fall from the sky. It's not the European Court of Justice that initiates that. It's the people, the citizens of Europe, that can go to a national court, and the national court then refers the case to the European Court of Justice. So it needs the one person that actually starts a complaint, and it needs a national judge on whatever level to actually ask the European Court of Justice. And that shows that actually the European Union is not just some technocratic something somewhere. It is being used. The legal body of the European Union was used. And here citizens clearly used, especially Article 2, they used gender equality to push their rights through. And I think this is quite remarkable, and that was quite successful. So it was actually a nice moment of synergy between the European Union and between the European citizens here.
I think that's a very romantic, almost positive, but I would say really almost romantic view, because it shows, I mean, we can always wonder about how complex the interaction between the institutions can become in such a multi-layered organization. And the multi-layering is not simply a growing bureaucratic structure, is given also the fact that we want to keep up the principle of subsidiarity. So of course, solving problems closest to the people as possible. This leads to the fact that then you have many parliaments and you have many institutions, and you can get lost. But really, I think that the situation in Poland, and you describe it, where the opposition, the civil society, was encouraged to be active. So that the people were strengthened by the fact that there were some check and balances activated by a multi-layered system. Yeah. And so this gives me really hope about the resilience of the European Union, which may be very slow in taking decision, but it showed a certain resilience in the story of Poland, and with positive outcome of the election. Maybe one question from my side before we go over to our next bigger questions. You mentioned the kind of practical success of the European Commissions were the infringement procedures. So 1 million, you were mentioning the 1 million euros per day that were retained. Were there laws that have been withdrawn by the government in Poland, by the PiS government in Poland, given the pressure from the European Union side?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, for example, the disciplinary chamber that I mentioned that was removed. Of course, not entirely. They replaced it with another body, but they were at least publicly trying to be conform with European Union law. So this also shows that in order to be a good country in the European Union, or in order to be seen as a good country, you have to do something about that. It was not the case that Poland was completely ignorant. Then the case with regard to the different retirement ages, this was also resolved. And public perception might be one aspect of that. The monetary aspect was certainly another aspect of that. And the European Union was strong because of that power. And I also believe, and this already pertains a little bit already to to what I wanted to say about the political aspect of that, because so far we've only spoken about the judiciary. But Poland benefits largely from its European Union membership. It's the country receiving the highest amount of funds. And there, the influx of money was stopped from the general budget, and this is something that no longer, although being a judicial decision, it directly impacted not only the judges that were affected by the judicial reform, it directly impacted the regions and the local community in Poland, namely because it was suddenly completely insecure for them to apply for funds coming out of the cohesion fund, for example. I think for the period of 21 to 27, the cohesion policy funds designated roughly 76.5 billion to Poland, and they were suddenly at risk because the country did no longer comply with the rule of law, and the payment of those funds are also made conditional upon compliance with the rule of law, and also with, by the way, gender equality. So some of them are directly linked to that goal. And in practical terms, what happens is not that the European Union transfers this money to the national government, and the national government then passes it on to the respective region or local community to receive it, but the regions have to apply for that. And what happened, especially in the last year, where this issue became extremely, extremely prominent, was that the regions changed their position. It was insecure to apply because the payment was no longer to be secured because the national government violated the rule of law. So this was already a root cause or a reason for opposition in that regard. And the monetary mechanisms of the European Union worked in that regard. Fun fact, and very ironic, especially with regard to the monetary aspect, is that if you look up the website of the Polish government, or the old Polish government, you will see that the main reason for membership of the European Union and how they sell it is money. Yet they were the reason why the money did no longer come, and then the surprising result, of course. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to see that on different level, then the European Union membership has been one of the great paradigms of the great contradiction of what the peace government was trying to do. So getting money on the one hand, but on the other hand being the cause for not getting the money, and trying to drift away from the rule of law as it is defined in European treaties, and yet being sanctioned and complying also to requests of the European Union, but as little as possible on the other hand. So all this contradiction made a contribution, the strengthening of civil society through the European backing, to the situation we have now, because we had some months ago elections, and we have an old or a former future prime minister, which is the current prime minister, Donald Tusk, which we know from the time he was in the European Council. Why did it took so long to take over? So the clear question is, how could they take over? Why is there a majority? And the other hand, also the simply technical one, what happened in the last 3 months? Clearly the election were 3 months ago, and it took 3 months for him to take over the government. What did the peace try as a last resource to slow that down?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, thank you. And I think this also, it's little bit linked to our first question, but it's not only the last 3 months. I think what we sometimes forget is, I mean, you said it, I was very romantic and positive about the judicial aspect, and that's true. But then it was only the judicial aspect. And this is how it started out. So the political activism has certainly started to kick in, but it was in the beginning by no means as active as it was in the past month or years. I want to say last 3 years. And we see this when we look at the 2018 local elections in Poland. This opposition was already there. Topics like, if we look, for example, at as in gender equality and so forth, they were there, but nearly no party addressed them. LGBT concerns were not really addressed in the local elections. The Civic Coalition did so, and the Polish People's Party. But other than that, that was not so much of a dominant factor, although we had many more female politicians as candidates. As a result, they were nowhere to be seen. A totally different picture now in the national elections. It has the highest amount of female MPs ever in Poland. So that was really a change. And I think this change over the year can totally be attributed to more pressure from the Law and Justice Party, and the fact that also that civil society and opposition actually, in a way, some initiative partnered with the political side. It's one aspect to express political opposition in the streets, but to quote the philosopher Hannah Arendt, it also has to translate in the political sphere. And this did not happen very successfully in 2018. It happened very successfully in 2023. We have seen that that opposition parties and several civil society groups, for example, the Committee for the Defense of Democracy or the Citizens of the Republic, the All Poland's Women's Strike, for example, they signed an agreement for the rule of law. We've also seen that in the last 3 years, institutions advocating for gender equality suddenly registered in Brussels to have a lobbying presence in Brussels. The numbers are still quite disappointing. They started to register, and most of them, no, all of them started to register in 2020. Poland is a member of the European Union since 2004. I mean, this is a very, very long time. In total, we have 249 Polish institutions represented there, and only 4 represent gender equality causes. So I think it is important to know that opposition took time. It was much more targetedly organized, and we had the monetary aspect of the European Union that was suddenly being felt in a much stronger way than 5 years ago. So that was certainly something that helped here.
Let's stay then on the topics. You were saying that basically, if I understand the argumentation correctly, there was a kind of inertia between the laws that have been made and how the rule of law was diminishing its importance in Poland, and how civil society was mobilized for it. While the judiciary reaction was quite fast, it came to the street with a certain inertia, and now it came, and this was one of the key factors for the shift in the parliamentary majority. What about topics? The PiS, although being from the right spectrum, did strong social policies. Did the opposition agree on a strong social program at the moment? I mean, the opposition, which by opposition I mean Donald Tusk, which is now the majority, but the former opposition. This broad coalition that has actually parties more from the bigger party is actually a center party, not a left party. Did they took over many social program points that were formerly of the PiS, or was it just really this backlash of rule of law that enabled the coalition to win?
Both. I mean, they definitely they had a strong focus on social policies. They had a strong focus on women's rights, on LGBT rights. They focused on the abortion rights, at least in the campaign. Also quite interesting here, because the coalition agreement does not consider the abortion rights to be reformed back, so to say. that is not a part of it, because there were disagreements among the coalition parties here. But it was definitely the case that they were able to pick on some topics of the piece. Absolutely, it was not just this was not an election. It was just one with European Union support. That would be wrong.
So it means that during the 8 years of peace government, also the opposition changed. What we have now was not just the opposition uniting and having a common coalition agreement, but we had them changing. In which respect would you say that during the peacetime the opposition parties changed? And this is the closing question. Because well, I think we don't have to overwhelm our listeners with well, very tense and interesting information. So I'll give you the floor, knowing that this is going to be the grand finale of yours.
Okay. So yeah, the changing of the opposition parties. I think I would still say that we've seen this especially in the last year, both with regard to topics, both as well as with regard to how they organize themselves. Absolutely, they were. And they were able to use this this public moment. We've also seen attacks by the piece on Donald Tusk trying to discredit him, and he was able to turn this around. So in a way, they played it out very strategically and successfully.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Berit. I'll stick to my promise that this was the last question, although, of course, many others pop up in my mind. But I guess the topic of Poland and the new government will accompany us for a long time. It will also change the majorities in the council, and we will see how far. You already spoke of well, the different articles triggered, and the question is now if there will be a majority to sanction Hungary more severely or not. But these are all questions that will be answered by the future. For today, we have looked back in the years in which the rule of law was endangered, and also now to the present, what led to this switch. And of course, it won't be. It's not a finished story. Many positions are still held by members of the peace government. But we had now a better perspective to understand the news we will catch in the next months about what's happening in Poland. Thank you very much, Berit.
Thank you so much.
And well, see you soon, I suppose. But I suppose you'll need a break after this 2 intense episodes with Progressiva. Thank you very much for being at disposal.
Thank you.